Bueno, pues...
Good morning again, everyone. It is already afternoon. This is the continuation of the European Carlos V Award at the European Research and Mobility Grants of the European Studies. This is the doctoral seminar of the Carlos V Award to the cultural roots in Europe. And our next speaker is Vanesa Miguel Barrado from the University of Extremadura. She will be introduced by BUSSIÈRE. Then I'm going to introduce myself. You have the bio in the documentation. He's a professor emeritus, Sorbonne University, Jean Monnet Chair of the History of the European Construction, member of several scientific councils in France and Europe, director or co-director of several collections of scientific works, and director of Journal Histoire, Économie et Société. His work focuses on the history of international relations and the construction of Europe. In recent years, he has co-directed the history program of the European Commission. He's one of the co-founders of this doctoral seminar, together with all the colleagues who haven't been able to come on this occasion. Professor Michel Dumoulin or Professor Sylvain Schirman, who haven't been able to make it here today, that are members of the jury anyway, so they will be following and reading your papers. So Professor BUSSIÈRE, thank you very much for being with us here today. You have the floor.
With the presentation of Vanesa Miguel Barrado, you have the opportunity to complete that was explained this morning, and I think the session is very coherent and interesting because her subject is very close but also different of the paper of Maria Laura Gasparini. I thank her very much because it's the first time in my life I hear about geoparks. So you have the answer of one of your questions. Few people know. And I visited some places that are effectively geoparked, but not because they were geoparked, because I ignore it. So you have you develop in your paper some element of reflection about this, and I think it's a good idea, and you have to precise all this. You come from University of Extremadura, and you wrote a PhD in business administration, if I understand, and you told me that the paper you present today is a part of the perspective of your thesis. So it's interesting for us to hear you. You can have the floor.
Buenas tardes a todas y a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for your introduction, Eric. I personally think that the topic I'm going to talk about today is a hot topic. It's topical, and it's a passion for me because it's about tourism, sustainability, planet sustainability. Because as I was saying in one of the last pages of my dissertation, this is the only way for a good tourism, sustainability. it is a paper about sustainable tourism. In the wake of Laura Gasparini's presentation, I'd like to thank the Yuste Foundation, Director Juan Carlos Moreno, Miguel Ángel, and all the expert panel. I'd like to congratulate the rest of the students today because all presentations are very interesting. I hope that among all of us we will be showing or showcasing different perspectives of what the cultural roots mean for Europe. What you do at this foundation is undeniably positive for society in general and for me in particular. And I would like to thank the two directors of my dissertation. Without them, I wouldn't be here today. They have helped me a lot, and also the Balondo Foundation. I had a pre-doctoral contract with them, and they work together, they collaborate with the Yuste Foundation. I know. So as I was saying, all these presentations, all these papers will be valuable, and this type of meetings, this type of seminars have an undeniable value because we put in common different perspectives and opinions, and this dissemination of knowledge will make us move forward. When I learned about these grants, I was precisely preparing one of the papers that I was using for my dissertation. So when I read about this call for papers, it was very easy for me to try and link my research, tourism in protected natural space, sustainable tourism, together with the preservation of local habits or local traditions. When we talk about social and economic development, we need to talk about preservation of values and traditions locally. And if I move along the timeline, when I learned I had been selected together with the rest of the students, it was a very special day for me because it was the night before I had to defend my dissertation. So it was a very important day. I was very happy. So I hope this contribution will be interesting to you. And I also want you can help me with your comments, remarks, to make this research more valuable or useful. So let's get to my PowerPoint. This is the title, UNESCO's World Geoparks, a sustainable development for the preservation of the cultural heritage in Europe. So I'm going to talk first about the structure of my presentation. I will start with the introduction, justification, the general goal, the theoretical framework in the literature, the hypothesis, then the methodology, the sample, the variables, the data analysis, and then I will be talking about the outcomes. And finally, I will reach some conclusions or final considerations and a list of limitations I have encountered and the perspective for future avenues for research. Well, this is the justification. As my colleague said, as Laura Gasparini said, tourism is a powerful industry worldwide. It is an important social and economic driver. If we look at numbers, it represents 10.4% of GDP globally. But if we go deeper, if we talk about natural tourism or rural tourism, it represents 3.9% of the GDP worldwide. So protected natural areas are excellent places for this type of tourism. I want to give you some numbers or some studies to give you context in this type of contexts, in this type of areas. They receive around 8 billion tourists per year. Sick. And Spain has much protected surface and sea area. It ranks 4th out of 177 countries with by the number of UNESCO's heritage sites. Spain ranks 2nd worldwide by the number of geoparks, UNESCO's geoparks, only 2nd to China. And Spain, at the European level, is the 1st country by number of UNESCO's geoparks, as you will see in some of the tables. So this important natural heritage is an excellent means to reach or to foster the economic development of the rural areas in Spain, so that they can preserve their traditions and local habits. But I have to say that Spain is one of the countries in Europe that is most affected by rural depopulation. There is a demographic challenge, and we have to find answers to overcome it. And we think that this sustainable tourism is an excellent tool for that, so that the objective of this research will focus on the local perception on sustainability of municipalities that are covered by the World Geoparks in Spain between 2009 and 2019. So the first question is how the tourism associated with the creation of a geopark is useful to preserve the traditions and to improve the quality of life of the rural populations associated to that area. So this is the map I'm focusing on. This is Spain in Europe, and we focus in Spain because it is the country with the highest number of geoparks. 16, because last week UNESCO added one more geopark in La Coruña. So this is the map of Spain. It's a pioneering country in terms of geoparks and protected areas. So this is the sampling, this is the sample, 15 in the case of my study, geoparks. 313 municipalities affected by the geoparks, covered by the geoparks. And look at this table. Look at the list of geoparks. Look at the geoparks that I have analyzed in my sample. I'm going to talk about some of them. For example, Cabo Gata, Níjar, the one that covers the highest population, or the largest population, and then Villorcas y Boresjara in Extremadura. Guadalupe is located in this park, and also the Granada, because it's the largest in extension. Well, this is the theoretical framework. There are over 253,000 protected areas in land areas and over 17,000 sea protected areas. These are just numbers, but I would like to focus on these 2 years, these 2 specific years, 1985, with the percentage of protected land area stood for 4%. It was only 4% in 2022. The surface of land area that was protected was 17%. And Spain is in a privileged situation because we can say that Spain was one of the pioneering countries because it passed the first national parks law in the world in 1986. We have to understand the legal basis for all these protected landscapes and areas, and in that case we have to learn about Ley 42/2007 about natural heritage and biodiversity. Well, we can find the definition of protected areas. You can see the classification: protected natural spaces, national parks, natural reserves, natural monuments, protected landscapes, and protected marine areas.
Natura.
If we look at the Natura 2000 network, we'll find the League and the SEPA zones. And if we step up another level, there are other areas protected by international instruments such as the biosphere areas, wetlands, geoparks. There are our main goals at the list of World Heritage. Like I said before, there are 15 geoparks in our study, and like I said last week, UNESCO declared 18 more, and one of them is in Spain. That's specifically Ortegal Cape in La Coruña in northwest Spain. If we look at this chart once again, we'll see that the best example, probably the one we know best, is the national park, because there are quintessential values to those parks. There are ecological values that are very important, and that's why they are the most protected parks in Spain. Since they are very unique and they have very specific features, they are highly protected. They have a high level of restrictions to public use, to leisure activities, to preserve the environment and the values, because they are considered museums of nature. Like I said before, we are going to focus on geoparks as the quintessential example of the one with greatest economic development, not just preservation. What are the UNESCO Geoparks? This is a definition by UNESCO itself. They are geographical areas that are unique and where the landscape has a great geological importance at an international level. Among their goals, the main one is to respond to the current challenges of sustainability from the point of view of preserving the natural and cultural heritage of the environment. Another goal would be the climate change mitigation, the reinforcement of the cultural identity, or the cultural and economic development of these areas that are mainly rural. If we go back to the origin of geoparks, we'll have to go back to the year 2000, where different places in Europe, such as Germany, France, Spain, and Greece, created what they called the European Geopark network to highlight their geological value. Later on, the UNESCO signed a convention with the European Geopark network, and they created the World Geopark network to have higher representativity throughout the world. And later on, in 2015, the UNESCO created a new label, which is what we today know as the World UNESCO Geoparks. Just to give you some examples, I have brought some images of some of the geoparks in Spain. Like I said before, I have to start off with the one in Extremadura, in this region. There is a high archaeological value and with much natural resource, many natural resources. They preserve culture and traditional activities that have been carried out for a very long time in these areas. They're all wonderful, but I'll give you a couple of examples more. This is the Gata Cape Níjar. These resources are a little bit different. This one is set on the coast, and the geological resources have great value, and it's in southeast Spain, in Almeria. Yet another one, the Basque Coast Geopark in northern Spain. And as we can see on the pictures, there is architectural value and natural value. If we move forward, we can say that the tourist industry has evolved greatly over the past decades. We have moved from a sun and beach tourism model towards a more sustainable model with rural and nature tourism. Just to give you some figures, in 2018, that was 15% of the total tourism in Spain, according to certain studies. But if we also looked at certain circumstances around us, such as the social and cultural changes, the new trends in tourism, the COVID pandemic, sustainability, and awareness on climate change, with all these conditions, we could claim that this should be the new mode of tourism that we should follow. If we go into the details of this trend, we can focus on geotourism. Geotourism is featured by sustainability, and the best places for that, for sustainable tourism, is geoparks. However, we can claim that this mode of tourism is quite noble. We can find recent studies in the literature, but it is not very well known by society or researchers. Like we said before, on the previous, or like we could see on the previous slides, these places are important tourism destinations. It is difficult to know the exact amount of tourism visiting these places because they are free and there is free access. They're open to everyone. But some studies claim that they're visited by around 10 million people a year. If we look at the details of the prior literature, we'll see that most of them have the same ideas. These ideas revolve around the fact that these geoparks play a very important role on cultural sustainability. They promote cultural and economic development of those areas. According to other authors, geoparks have important ecological historic value, and they play a key aspect in the regional development. According to other researchers, this geotourism promotes cultural heritage and increases the value of these regions. And finally, the cultural purpose helps mitigate the negative impact of tourism. Like we said before, there is a negative impact to tourism, but if we promote more sustainable tourism, if that will manage, then the impact is not that negative. And finally, geoparks promote sustainable development, research, cultural rescue, cultural development, local development, and citizens' participation. So based on that literature, we have come up with 3 hypotheses. The first one revolves around the idea that the preservation of culture can have a positive impact on the quality of life of the local population. The second hypothesis is that the tourism development has an impact on preserving the cultural values of the population. And the third hypothesis is that the tourism development has an impact on improving the quality of life of the populations, the rural populations. So the data collection methodology we've used is surveys. We've sent surveys to mayors of these areas, and we've asked those mayors to rank from 1 to 7 their perception on sustainability in their municipalities since they were declared a geopark. So we sent the survey to the mayors of those municipalities. 313 municipalities participated, and we asked them about different variabilities, such as preserving culture with a number of broken down items, tourism development, and quality of life. Those were the main points. We got 123 respondents. We had to filter them. Some of them were not consistent, and we only got 100 valid responses. We came up with a structural framework based on a number of indicators. And additionally, we used an analysis of importance and performance. With that, we can identify the weight of each of the indicators and the ones that need more work to improve management and the development of variables. The programs used for that were Smart BLS and SPSS for statistics data. If you look at the blue box, we have broken down that into different indicators. And those were the points that were assessed with 1 to 7 marks. We chose the mayors because they live in those municipalities and they are the main or the first political level. in the municipality management. Among the indicators within the preservation of culture, we have preservation of culture as such, the exploitation of culture as a tourism asset. Among tourism development, we analyze the increase of wealth, the wealth generated, the increase of tourism resources, the increase of tourists, and the use as leisure opportunities. We also asked them whether the declaration of Geopark actually met the expectations of the local population, whether it improved their quality of life, and finally, the global satisfaction with the declaration of the UNESCO Geopark declaration in their municipality. Well, these were the hypotheses. We wanted to see how the tourism development could have a positive impact in preserving culture, the impact it can have in the quality of life, and how it can have an impact in the quality of life of local population. Let's look at the results now. First of all, we have statistical results from the survey. With the construct preservation of culture, we can say that the most appreciated indicators, up to 7 on the Likert scale, are the exploitation of culture and local traditions as a tourism asset, and also how the culture and traditions have been preserved in the municipality. The least valued item was that geoparks could help preserve traditions. The best valued indicators were, first of all, as it should, because these environments are very touristy, is the fact that the number of tourists have increased in the municipality, and then 4.4 points saying that the municipality has now more leisure activity, more tourism activity, especially those related to the local traditions of those municipalities. On the other hand, the least valued one is the level of wealth in the population. Regarding the quality of life, the most valued indicator is overall satisfaction of the population with the declaration of a UNESCO Geopark. So with that, we have some hints on the results. And then, like we said before, we used structural equation modeling. With this, we can see 3 objective constructs, 3 points analyzed: tourism development, maintenance of culture, and quality of life. What we see in red are the indicators we have seen, and we can see how they're appraised on each of the dimensions, and then the arrows are the relations sets between the different dimensions. This shows on the next chart. These are our hypotheses. What we got from our hypothesis is that the preservation of culture could have an impact on the quality of life. All 3 hypotheses were very significant. At 1%, the tourism development has a positive impact in preserving culture, and finally, the tourism development could have an impact on the population's quality of life. The least weighted hypothesis is how the preservation of culture can have an impact on the quality of life, and we'll see later on the details of it. Additionally, we used this analysis that's quite novel These are the IPMA analysis, the importance performance analysis. With these, we can see the weight of each indicator and the ones that need action to improve performance. With this analysis, we saw that the number of tourists, the increased amount of leisure activities, and do have more weight. However, the performance index could be improved. By improving these indicators, the maintenance of culture in these municipalities could also be improved. Additionally, we did another important performance analysis by using the quality of life. And this way, we saw that more wealth for the population, more tourists, and more leisure use with activities related to culture and cultural values in those areas did have quite a lot of importance, but if better managed, they could help improve the quality of life for the local population. And we can now discuss the results. Like we said before, in one of the hypotheses, the one that was least important was preservation of cultural values and how it could impact on the quality of life. And with that, I could argue that we need to promote leisure activities related to the cultural activities and the local traditions to increase that relation. It is quite significant, but it can be improved. According to the results, preserving cultural values has importance on the quality of life, but it should be improved. And tourism in protected natural areas in general, and specifically in geoparks, that should be considered a driver of social and economic values for the benefit of the municipalities. And from the IPMA analysis, we draw that the most important cultural values are the increase in the number of tourists, which is very important. Like we said before, we need to be careful. Those are very fragile spaces. We cannot consider mass tourism. We need to respect a very interesting notion such as the load capacity. You can't have many tourists around because they need to respect those unique values. And the use of the leisure resources related to cultural values. And the final conclusions based on the results is that in line with everything I said before, I consider that these results are especially relevant for many stakeholders related to sustainable tourism, and as it must, we are here because of the Council of Europe, and we consider that these results may be taken into account and used by bodies of this type. Like we said before, geoparks are considered a very important tool, and they are triggers of the economic and social development of these mainly rural areas. For all this, we need to put our stakes on sustainable tourism, not only in geoparks, but also in every protected area we have. And in that sense, I would like to refer to the tools we have, such as the European Charter on Sustainable Tourism, with which we aim at respecting those values typical of these environments. With all that, it's essential to manage respectful tourism, tourism that's respectful of that load capacity instead of mass tourism, and tourists that are educated and that are not going to try to obliterate cultural and natural values, and also more active participation of the local corporation and local, regional and national corporations, and also the population itself, because in the end they are the most impacted ones. And finally, for all that, I would say that we need to provide the basic infrastructure and tourist infrastructure to improve the quality of life of these populations.
Finalmente,
And finally, we can summarize it with just one sentence. We need to bet on balance. We need to bring it about. Balance between the biological, economic, social, and cultural dimensions of the natural spaces. And it has to be respectful, because otherwise the future will be devastating and we will find ourselves with a problem, immersed in the problem of depopulation and the degradation of the protected areas. Because if the amount of activities that can be performed in those spaces is too limited, the population will be deprived of the means they need to survive, which will lead to the depopulation of the areas and the degradation of them. So I will finish by talking about the limitations and the future avenues for research. The main limitation is the difficulty to access data in such a disaggregated level. We have a large database of data, but the sample was not large enough for this study methodology. We sent a questionnaire via email, and then we had to follow up with phone calls in order to get more respondents. So it was a very hard work. Even the municipalities were not aware that they were part of a geopark. So it is an activity that has to be fostered and disseminated. If you're part of a geopark, you need to be aware of it. That was really surprising. Another limitation is that even if we are focusing in Spain as the second largest country, the second country with the largest number of geoparks, these studies should be also performed in other countries in Europe with geoparks. We have also focused on municipalities, and mayors have been the main respondents. But it would be essential to try and be able to open up this study to all the stakeholders, for example, citizens, visitors, tourists, members of, the trustees of the geoparks, or other regional stakeholders, or even national stakeholders. So these are only preliminary data that serve nonetheless the purpose of being the first step. And maybe we could also do a segmentation of geoparks and a differentiation, because maybe geoparks located in inner Spain are different from the ones that you can find in the mountains or along the coastline. Maybe we could detect more differences between them. This is it. Thank you. I hope you liked it, or at least found it interesting, and I remain at your disposal for questions or remarks. It was a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. So thank you very much. I think your presentation is better than the paper you gave. You precise some points, especially in the first part of your presentation, and I think the potential can be developed again. That's the first general remark. The second remark is the common point with your papers, and for some aspects, the aim of routes and geopark has a lot of common. So you have another way to promote the same. And you have also other kind of park, natural park, etc. Also protected areas in cities with monuments. So you have a multitude of space with specific rules and are oriented to promote something you explain. So I think you have to explain more the specificity of a geopark. First, if you insert the geopark project in the chronology we had this morning, you have a link between the European landscape conservation of 2000 and the creation of the first geoparks. You have to explain why. So you have to explain who was at the origin of the initiative, and if, in the case of Spain, because you have more information, people that promoted European landscape were the same that were at the origin of the geopark. That's a political, institutional point of view. Second, it's very interesting to, for an historian and geograph, as my old friend Jesus, is to explain people that you can preserve cultural identity through geology. And at the origin of geopark, it's not a surprise. It's really founded, but you have to explain why. But in the beginning, you explain, you speak about Instituto Geológico y Mineral de España. What they do in this project, because they are involved. You have to understand what they do in this boat. If you go in more ancient reference, you can speak about geographs in Italy and France and probably in some other countries. The European geographical tradition, especially ruralist, is to say you have a specific geological territory. On this territory, with specificity of on a geological point of view, you have a special agriculture. If you have a special agriculture, you have a special landscape, you have a special sociology, rural sociology. You have special size or form of villages. And you have so special identity. And if you take area where they make wine, it's very well documented. And as I do not know what was Geopark, I look in France, Beaujolais is a Geopark. Why? Because you have a specific geological condition. Second, you have wine, but each village has a specificity. You have a specific society in that kind of village. You have a specific monument, etc. And you can decide to preserve, etc. So you enter in the logic of geopark. So that, I think you have to look a little bit more, explain the concept and the specificity of the concept in the mass of initiative and administrative structure to promote cultural or local identities in country. Second, last point, it's a very European concept. And you have to look at China, because it's a second place in the world. So I think probably you have some literature for this point in China, and perhaps you can find some general reflection for you. Bon, that's all for the moment.
Thank you. Número 4, sí. Thank you very much, Eric. I see already some hands up, so please, Eladio.
Yeah, Tutu. Bueno, español.
In Spanish. I come from I have an environmental background. I've been working on it for 40 years and on environmental issues in Spain and Europe. And I have a question for you. Why did you choose the ugly duckling of all the protected areas? Because geoparks must be understood from within the history of protected areas. The first protected area was Yellowstone in 1887. It was an American concept that we mirrored in Europe 20 years later. And we did this. It was decided to protect specially places, Lieu de Mémoire, Covadonga, Ordesa, impressive landscape. It was just the landscape. The first European park was in Sweden, and then in Switzerland. And then in Spain, the first ones were Covadonga, Ordesa, and then Aigües Tortes. But they were based on the romanticism ideas. They were kind of preserved territories in the wake of the first American parks. In the era of the colonization and the going to the west to try and preserve them from the invaders and the first settlers. And then we started to pay attention to the fauna and flora, for example, in Spain, Doñana and Tablas de Daimiel, special places for migrating birds. And a series of parks were created in Spain. I remember all of them because I've been in all of them, but one, also in the Canaries, that have a huge biodiversity of birds, Garajonaiteidae, that were declared in the 1950s. And then in the 70s, they decided to not just choose them randomly just because we know the mayor or because someone pushes for them. So they insisted on habitats and bird protection in the 90s, systematic protection of flora and fauna. And nobody was thinking about geology at all. So this system is now being completed with appendices because this process takes long to acquire legal protection and to be protected by countries. And then UNESCO came up with the geoparks because, of course, we needed to protect places with geological interests, with fossils, etc. And the list of Spanish parks, I've been in 2 of them, Maestrazgo, that is close to where I was born, and another one, and I wasn't even aware of them being geoparks. I understand that for mayors, every opportunity to do something about the municipality or the area where they work and they live, so that they can attract more tourists or people, is more than welcome. But it is not a panacea. For example, Caza de Orihuela said in the 17th century that some places in Spain were lacking population. So why did you choose your parks as the subject matter for your dissertation? Because people are not aware of them, and they don't have a specific legislation to protect them. Unlike the national parks, because every national park has a law associated with it. A law needs to be passed at the national parliament in order to create a national park. And they have been widely studied, and people know how many people visit them. They have an associated visitor center, etc. So I chose geoparks because there are several studies that have studied the national parks, and I wanted to see a comparison between national parks and geoparks, because they are very limited and they are contradictory. So I wanted to choose the most contradictory example. There is a study that compares evaluations by mayors of geoparks and national parks, because we wanted to understand how they perform. There was a percentage of one percentage point of difference between the marks or the evaluation, the assessment given to a national park or a geopark, because I'm interested in the social and economic development. I am aware of the history of the creation of national parks and how some authors dubbed them natural museums or museums of nature. And then the economic and social development was incorporated little by little. And then in 2014, social and economic development wasn't given as much importance as the other aspects. They insisted on preservation of natural values, of course. That comes only naturally because they are spectacular. That's why I chose geoparks. Vanesa, maybe you should talk about that in your final work. Anna Milosevic.
I'm going to wait for you to put the headphones. Yeah, thank you, Vanessa, for such a wonderful presentation. I'm always delighted to see good quantitative research, because I do more of a qualitative research, so compliments on that. I have actually one question for you, and maybe just a couple of considerations, because I think that, like, within the data that was available to you, you did quite a good job. And I like how you analyzed the available data, but also your own reflection that the limits that this study has, and not only in terms of data, because you said that you had surveyed 100 municipalities of 353 in total. 313, which is a quite good sample. But the limitation of the study was mainly in terms of data that you receive only from municipalities. So I'm more interested, and I think you are also more interested in learning about the consumption of these sites by the visitors themselves. So do you have any ideas on how you can mine that kind of data? I mean, you already did the research, you already did the analysis, so for this paper, this is already done. Maybe you can twitch a bit data or extract some more information from the existing data. But in the terms of the future research, I'm interested, how do you think these data can be accessed? Because when I think about the cultural roots and when I think about geoparks, I imagine it like one big basket. And in this basket, you have fruits, you have vegetables, you have maybe a piece of butter. So it's a bit this, a bit of that. So you have the tourism, you have culture, you have historical sites, you have positive heritage, you have negative heritage. So I think, like, for me personally, maybe for my own research, it would be interesting to learn more about how diversified these geoparks are in terms of, as Eric rightfully said, you also mentioned in a couple of slides that you have like architectural heritage, and then you have patrimoine, which is different than heritage. So you also have natural landscapes. I was thinking also about forgotten sites from the Second World War, like the trenches in the mountains. In Italy, we have many of those as well in the Alps. So I'm interested in how can we gather this data and how can we make a more narrow analysis to actually answer your question, because you talk about cultural values, and you talk about, but you never define those cultural values. So do they relate to history? Do they relate to memory? Do they relate to preservation of environment, et cetera, because values can be different. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you very much, Anna. I see Teresa Fraser is also raising her hand, and maybe you want to make some comments. It's time to raise the hand so I can share the okay, 1 and 2 over there. Okay. Teresa, please.
I had been to some of those geoparks without being aware of them being geoparks, which leads me to say this. Because geopark has a definition in itself that sets them apart from other parks with similar features. So maybe you had not thought about that in your dissertation. Have you been able to get indicators to improve the Spanish legislation so that they can fit better into the UNESCO's definition? No, we have used many indicators. Apart from these, I have used also studies from the national parks, because my dissertation was about both of them. And I've been working with other indicators. For example, transport infrastructures, the distance among the municipalities, or between the closest airport and the nearest bus or train station. We also work with financial and economic variables from the tourist operators. And my final conclusion is that I cannot, or I do not dare to talk about legislation or any suggestion as to how to improve the legislation. But my final conclusion is that they lack financial resources, money, to foster them, to promote them, but always in a sustainable way, by respecting the load capacity without turning them into massive places of tourism where tourists flock. Thank you. Paula, you have the floor. Thank you. Congrats for your presentation, Vanessa. It was impressive, and I would like to talk about the role and the importance of the España vaciada, empty Spain, that are not empty as of now. They've been empty for some time, and I think Soria, which is the place I come from, is one of the most depopulated areas. I wasn't aware of the existence of geoparks. I was aware of the existence of the national and natural parks, but I liked how you showed how they could give a boost to some rural areas, and that can become tourist areas, away from the concept of the sand and fan and beach areas. And I like the focus you put on sustainability, natural sites, and the development of areas that have been forgotten, that are nevertheless essential because of the natural assets. Laura? Congratulations, I like the presentation very much, and I have a comment because last year I was in Guadalupe and I became aware of the existence of geoparks. I remember that in Guadalupe there was a combination of, how to say, several aspects. There was the Guadalupe Monastery, UNESCO's sites, heritage sites, and then the geopark. And thanks to several local action groups, there was an initiative to retrieve the old pilgrims' ways around Guadalupe. So it was a combination of several initiatives around Guadalupe, and it was also part of the Charles V route. So they are a good alternative for having a combination of several different alternatives all together. Thank you, Laura. Yes, I remember you were there. And I wanted to say something in the wake of my colleagues' comments or remarks. Even if Eladio said it was the ugly duckling, I want to say this is very positive. This is a positive concept. Ugly duckling because it's maybe unknown, and I'd like to say that maybe through this initiative, through your work, you can make it more known, widely known. If you can link it to wider known initiatives, for example, the cultural routes or the national parks or the UNESCO sites. So you can use this as an initiative or as a way of linking it to wider known initiatives. And I have a question, because you said that they receive many visitors because they are open and free. I went to the Netherlands recently and I was surprised to see, I cannot say whether positively or negatively, depends on your point of view, that in order to get to those protected areas, national parks and national reserves, some of them were geoparks maybe, and they were not free. And I'm not used to paying an entrance fee to get to a vast open area. They get extra protection for them through the fees and extra funds for the maintenance. And they also get extra visibility and extra recognition. So people say, hey, this is a place we need to preserve. So by imposing a fee for an entrance fee, you are like making them look at something special. I know some people have suggested charging a fee for some of the geoparks or parks in general in Spain, for example, Monfragüe. I don't know if you have, if you're aware or if you have analyzed the impact of imposing an entrance fee, if it's been considered to be feasible or not, if it's been considered for the future for geoparks or not. Yes, it is part of the future avenues of research, the paying of an entrance fee, and the opinions differ. Some researchers see it as something positive, some others think it's negative. Those who reject it say that that money would be put in a general case, so to say, and that they will not be spent specifically on geoparks. It will be spent on an array of natural sites or natural parks, not specifically the geoparks. But I think it's very interesting. Several studies have focused on that, and we need more studies. Any more comments or questions? No? And we need to head for lunch. So one of the singularities of having this recorded is not just that we can stream it and we can reach many more people. We can also complete the remarks that should be addressed to you, and we can review, we can rewatch the recording so that we can think of more comments or questions to make. Thank you. Lunch will be served downstairs, the restaurant. Downstairs, right?